Hello, my name is Natalie Westfall, and the topic of my persuasive speech is the pro-choice versus pro-life debate on abortion in America. I found two sources supporting each side of this argument and analyzed them using the human communication rubric. This first speech is one that was given at a pro-choice women's rights rally by an OBGYN. The speaker used her own experiences as a provider in a state where abortion is banned to show the importance of abortion as healthcare, as well as a call to action to physicians to stand up for the rights of their patients. Her articulation and speech are appropriate for the situation. Her voice and loudness help to convey her message. Her semantics and vocabulary are descriptive but still simple enough to reach a wide audience. Her syntax is powerful. The pauses after she speaks of the women that need safe access to abortion give the audience a moment to reflect on the circumstances that these women are facing due to widespread abortion bans in America. I would say that there could have been more nonverbal language used. However, given the short length of this speech as well as the serious subject matter, I do not think it was necessary. Speech included a very impactful call to action, as I said, not only to the public and to politicians, but to physicians to stand up for the rights of their patients. The second pro-choice speech is a TED Talk by a demographer and professor, Dr. Diana Green Foster. She studies the consequences of unwanted pregnancy, and I found this speech to be especially interesting as it used evidence-based research rather than the more anecdotal and emotional-based appeal of the other speeches that I analyzed. Foster's articulation and speech are appropriate to the situation. Her voice is low and not super expressive, which could have been improved upon in her speech. However, her voice is still loud enough and clear enough for the situation. Her vocabulary achieves its function of describing her studies in a way that is easy to understand for those who may not be familiar with her research. Foster's syntax flows. It is a well-prepared speech with a lot of scientific information, which tends to be a good point of view to look at when analyzing a situation with two different sides, such as abortion. Foster walks around the stage a lot. She looks across the audience and she uses a lot of hand motions, some good nonverbal communication to convey her point. The audience of her speech was engaged by her delivery of the shocking information in her study in order to hook them and help them to focus on and remain interested in her research. Just as a disclaimer, the next two speeches are interviews, so they are given in a more intimate setting than the last two, which changes the context in which they are graded on the human communication rubric. This third speech is pro-life, and it is given by Dr. John Bruchowski, an OBGYN who formerly performed abortions, but has now changed his stance and is anti-abortion. He runs a women's clinic and is heavily involved in the church, a big part of the reason why he changed his calling and his opinion. Dr. Bruchowski's articulation and speech are appropriate to the more intimate interview setting. His voice is very expressive and at an appropriate volume. Dr. Bruchowski's story was a bit difficult to follow as he was speaking quickly with a lot of information at once. However, his message was clear towards the end of his speech. He uses his hands and a lot of facial expressions in the speech, which made it more interesting and captivating for me to watch, as he really shows his passion on his face when speaking about the subject of anti-abortion activism. The audience in this case is viewers of this Christian broadcasting company, and he appeals to them by discussing his faith and using a call to action for people who may be seeking a different path from either performing abortions as a provider or receiving abortions as a mother. The final speech I analyzed was an interview of another OBGYN, Dr. Altman, who formerly performed abortions and is now involved heavily in anti-abortion activism. She discusses her experience with finding the church after going through a period in which she felt a great deal of shame and guilt for the abortions that she had performed. However, her interview seemed to be the weakest of the bunch in terms of effective communication. Dr. Altman spent a decent number of pauses figuring out the correct words to use, but her articulation was still effective enough for the situation, but it could have been better. She talks in a very low and monotone voice, but at an appropriate volume for the situation. Her semantics ability is descriptive enough, but I believed she could have used more adjectives and those sorts of words in her speech to convey her message stronger. The syntax of the speech was effective. It was easy to follow and flowed well given the interview setting. There was not much nonverbal language used. She tended to look away from the camera a lot and didn't use much body language. And the audience isn't really addressed in this speech as it is mostly focused on Dr. Altman's story and her transition from pro-choice to pro-life as an OBGYN. So I can see how that might have affected her score, as that may not have been the goal of her speech, to connect with the audience. Overall, I believe that the pro-choice speeches that I found scored better on the human communication rubric. This could have been because of the situational differences, my own personal biases, or the differences that factored into each speech. However, I did use the human communication rubric to grade each to the best of my abilities to remain unbiased when looking at points of views that are different from my own. As for my final thoughts, I am pro-choice. I believe that it is a woman's right to choose whether or not she would like to carry a pregnancy to term, for whatever reason she might have, and I don't believe it's my business or any business of the government to control that. I pulled a couple of quotations in this slide from a recent article published by the Journal of the American Medical Association, which is a peer-reviewed source of articles written by doctors and other medical professionals. Very reliable source. And that is all I have. Thank you for watching.